My name is Father Patrick, founder of a website called christianart, and today we're at the National Gallery in London to look at a truly magnificent and beautiful exhibition.
Siena, the rise of painting, explores a pivotal moment in the 14th century when the Italian province of Siena became the epicentre of a new artistic movement.
But the exhibition is absolutely vast, so we will concentrate on just the one work of art, and as it's the month of May, a Madonna and Child.
The Virgin and Child with Saints Dominic and Aurea by Duccio is one of the defining artworks of this period and is nothing short of a masterpiece. The artist intricately plays with theology, visual symbolism and the innovative triptych form to create a piece that was intended to wow its audience. I'll be joined by Sir Gabriele Finaldi, director of the National Gallery, to find out the impact this masterpiece and other works from this period had in Christian art.
These are among the most beautiful objects ever made by human hands. And to be able to contemplate some of these in silence, it's a huge privilege.
The Siena exhibition focuses on the work of pioneering 14th century artists who brought a new sense of realism, detail, and enhanced storytelling to religious imagery. This period coincided with the emergence of personal devotional objects, with triptychs, panels, and sculptures being created not solely for monasteries or churches, but for a growing middle class who wanted beautiful religious items in their own homes and chapels.
So we are here surrounded by magnificent 13th and 14th century works of art in the first room of the exhibition. And it was a time that there was a major shift taking place in Western art. Artists had been working largely for big monasteries, big cathedrals, big church commissions. But with the rise of the middle classes during the Middle Ages, what happened is that these middle classes wanted to have some private devotional objects to bring sort of their spirituality deep into their homes. So comes to the fore sort of a whole array of new artworks on a much smaller scale, but equally intricate and beautifully made. And that trend in Italy started with travelers and pilgrims coming down and traveling down from Northern Europe, more specifically in Flanders and in Paris. Pilgrims who traveled down to Rome brought with them these small sort of diptychs and triptychs that they could unfold, and that revealed these very intricate, detailed little sculptures, usually narrating the life of Christ or the passion of Christ. An Italian artist, for the very first time, would have seen this whole idea of having a work of art on a hinge that, when closed, sort of offered protection to the work of art, but when opened, revealed this whole magnificent content inside.
One of the earliest painters to adopt and adapt this new hinged panel format was Duccio di Buoninsegna. He saw the power of an artwork that could open and close like a book. When shut, it provoked curiosity. What wonder lies within? But this was more than just a clever design. The innovative triptych form also enabled to celebrate a deeply theological statement, a visual echo of Revelation itself, where hidden glory can be unveiled as the side panels are opened.
One of the great appeals toward a diptych with 2 hinged panels or a triptych with 3 hinged panels, such as in our case, is that the patron would use it normally and have it closed in their homes. And part of the appeal is that then at some stage the patron would open it for his guests and then reveal this whole beautiful, luminous interior. So there's a playfulness as well, that it's closed, but then when it's revealed to the guests, then everybody has this sort of wow effect of what we're looking at.
When standing before a triptych, our viewer experience should start with imagining the artwork closed. The viewer's gaze is drawn upward to the triangular section at the top. At its center sits King David, a pivotal figure in biblical history and direct ancestor of Christ. David represents the royal lineage that leads to Jesus. To his right stands Isaiah, and to his left Abraham, two great prophets who foretold the coming of the Messiah. The remaining four figures are additional patriarchs and prophets, each holding scrolls inscribed with Old Testament verses that prophesy Christ's advent and anticipate the Virgin's birth. King David, richly dressed as a king, holds a book, his book of Psalms. He is the only figure whose name is inscribed beside him. Isaiah holds a scroll, its text now largely faded, but possibly referencing Isaiah chapter 7. The prophecy of the virgin birth. Abraham, to the right, holds a verse from Genesis chapter 22, the promise that God made to him about the blessings that would come through his descendants. Below Isaiah, we see Moses holding a scroll from Exodus, where God reveals himself to his people in the passage of the burning bush. And opposite Moses is Jacob, holding a scroll bearing a verse from Genesis chapter 28. Words that capture precisely what Duccio hoped his artwork would evoke, a sense of awe and expectation for the heavenly treasure hidden within.
What is really beautiful is how Duccio has painted these prophets. Where are they looking at? Yes, they're holding the scrolls, but they're not looking at the scrolls. They're actually looking down into the painting, because each of them has foretold the coming of the Messiah. And where is the Messiah? Is actually down there.
Opening the panels now reveals the beautiful, graceful image of Christ in the tender hands of his mother. Like a sacred book springing to life, Duccio unfolds the love and the mystery of the Virgin and Child, drawing us deeper and deeper, layer upon layer, into the heart of revelation itself. Here, this isn't just mere storytelling. No, it is actually commanding our gaze, as if heaven itself is opening before our very eyes.
So on the left, we see Saint Dominic being placed there, and Saint Dominic is holding a red book. And I like the fact that the book is also painted red, exactly the same as King David, which means that somehow Saint Dominic, in his wisdom, is continuing the tradition and the scriptural tradition from King David all the way to him, and then does his own writings to continue sort of this Christian handing over to future generations. And on the right, we see Saint Aurea, this 3rd century martyr, not that well known. But her main feature is the holding of this blue cross with 2 horizontal bars, one short and one long. And the beautiful thing is whenever we see that with saints, is that these 2 crossbars means that, yes, the life of a saint, however short, by their goodness, leads into the longer eternal life. And then we come to, of course, the middle of this triptych, which is the depiction of the Madonna and Child. And we see Our Lady sort of in a very gracious pose looking down at the Christ child that she's holding on her arm. And you can just see the hands and the elongated fingers that are holding Christ and really sort of protecting him. And Christ is playing. You can see his right hand is sort of unveiling his mother and showing his mother to the world to say, well, she is my mother. Pray to her and she will intercede for you. The beautiful details that we see furthermore is the 2 stars that are placed on Our Lady, one above her head and one on her shoulder, to say that now, after this earthly life, she is now one of the celestial beings, the Queen of Heaven. And Our Lady is flanked on either side by these 4 angels, all in prayerful poses for us, emulating what we are asked to do, is to give praise to Our Lady. And then the other detail that I absolutely love is the tooling of the halos around Our Lady and also the Christ child. So this tooling was a technique that artists used, that after the gilding was applied, that the gilding was burnished, then the artist could apply with tiny little tools, these little knocks going all around the detailing. And what it does is that as I move back and forth, and when we do that as viewers, is that the light starts to play within all these tiny incised areas. So it gives us this very luminous effect and immediately conveys that we're just not looking at any beings, but we're looking at celestial beings.
Joining me is Sir Gabriele Finaldi, the director of the National Gallery. As a man of faith, I'm keen to hear what he thinks of these beautiful private devotional objects.
Private devotion is a very, very important motor for the development of particular formats. You know, the triptych, the diptych, the small individual panel for devotion. But also remember that, you know, Siena witnesses really the early origins of the altarpiece. So two very, very kind of significant new formats for private devotion on the one hand, and then public liturgy in the church, in the cathedral on the other. And both of these formats have a huge influence on the development of European art. So Siena is a kind of crucible where these new formats are being developed. And you always need somebody who can bring all that together. And that personality is Duccio di Buoninsegna. He's very, very strongly represented in the National Gallery's collection. He is the sort of giant who makes this sort of leap forward and brings Siena into the absolute mainstream of European art.
Yes, and I think when you look at his work, it's just, you're almost seduced by its beauty, and you're sort of really drawn to it. So do you have that as well, that you are sort of almost on an emotional level, not just on an art historical or intellectual level, but also on an emotional level, that you're just drawn to these objects?
I agree with you, Father Patrick. There's no escape from the extraordinary aesthetic beauty of these objects. These are highly wrought, very, very carefully crafted, of course, but they also have a strong emotional pull. I mean, we're seeing a move from the traditional Byzantine representations, which conform to certain formats and so on. Suddenly everything is becoming more natural. What we're seeing in these divine images is something that's closer to our earthly experience. And I think that's where Siena is making its great contribution. When you look at Duccio's children, for example, when you look at the way he represents the Christ child, I mean, there's a naturalness there in the way he wants to stroke his mother's face or takes hold of the veil that she's wearing. There's a playfulness and an observation of lived reality.
As these are private devotional objects, do you sometimes actually spend time on your own here in this gallery?
I'm in the extraordinarily privileged position that I can come in before the public comes in. Yes. I can stay on in the evening, and just the opportunity to look quietly, to look close up, to look for long periods at some of these objects. You know, these are among the most beautiful objects ever made by human hands. And to be able to contemplate some of these in silence, it's a huge privilege.
We've just been hearing about the influence of private devotional objects pioneered by artists such as Duccio, just at a time when it was possible for a larger audience to start acquiring these private devotional objects into their homes. Religious art was now for the first time available to the masses. And nowadays we take it for granted that we can carry these images even in our wallets, in our pockets, have a screensaver on our computers. But probably for me, the most private devotional object par excellence that we can all carry with us is probably the Holy Rosary. I think probably many of you watching have a rosary on you. And I think that's exactly made in the same spirit. That throughout the day, not necessarily when we're thinking to pray, we put our hands in our pockets and we say, oh, there's this rosary. Time has come to maybe say a little prayer. And I think these prompts are great. So maybe during this month of May, this month dedicated to Our Lady, why not carry a rosary on you? Or maybe have even an image of Duccio's triptych that we just looked at. All means to prompt us to prayer and to bring us into the presence of the divine. I hope you enjoyed our brief visit to the Siena exhibition at the National Gallery here in London. If you like what we do, please click and subscribe, and thank you for watching.
And if you haven't already, head over to www.christianart and subscribe for free to receive our daily email, where I pair the gospel reading of the day with a work of art and write a short reflection, exploring beauty to grow closer to God. Be part of our community and subscribe, or simply download the app.